Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton of FL. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Dan. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I'm really excited for this episode. It's our last show of the year, and this is something we've never done before. We are going to speak to an NHL franchise executive. I'm sure this is going to be a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I met Greg first time almost about a year ago at the John Molson School of Business Sports Marketing Conference. And as I was preparing, I don't know if it was Greg or his assistant, had sent me over his 3-page bio for me to read through as I was getting ready to MC the event. And my first thoughts are, here's a C-suite guy, here's a pro sports exec, and here's a lawyer. Ouch, this is going to be painful at the end of the day. I have to tell you, if you've ever learned not to judge someone off their bio and their title, this would be the case. Greg is personable, he's a gentleman, and he's a true mensch. So this should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I mean, being a lifelong hockey fan, you wonder what happens behind closed doors, and we'll get a little bit of that tonight. So Greg Kirstein is the Senior VP and General Counsel of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He'll join us in a little while. But first, as usual, some news and notes. Let's begin with this interesting piece from Harvard Business Review, Mike. And you made me get a subscription because I have to say, there's a lot in there every week, and it's been really fascinating to read. And one is 10 leadership lessons from COVID field hospitals, because if you can learn those crisis lessons from people on the front lines, I mean, you can do anything, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've kind of focused in these areas, I think, since we started the season back in September. But there's a lot of areas and a lot of things that come out of pandemics or crises that leadership really, separates, I guess, those that really know how to lead and those that don't. And when you look at some of these areas, I mean, these are pretty fascinating. And I have to tell you that of the top 10, I would probably say at least 9 apply to every single business.
Yeah, let's go through a couple of them right now. So acknowledging uncertainty is, I think, a really important one on the PR level, because I'm not a big fan of sugarcoating things when people know what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think the reality, and you'll see as we go through a lot of these points, that being real has really become the new call of the day for leadership, and acknowledging the fact that we live in there and not trying to hide behind the fact that everything's wonderful and everything is okay. Acknowledge the uncertainty. You now make a connection with those people, and that whether that is the doctors and the nurses, or whether that's your employees, expressing the fact that we don't know really what comes tomorrow. There is no playbook in a pandemic. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the whole goal is to try and make that connection so you create this bond between your team. The other one, which really is you got to focus your search. I mean, obviously, when we run business on a day-to-day under normal terms, we're a little bit all over the place. And one of the things that really brings some strength to the exercise is this ability to focus the search and admitting there's uncertainty, but trying to find, narrow down those areas and stay on focus and stay on point to keep your team going.
I also found delegate authority, number 3, to be pretty challenging. I found during the pandemic, I had the option of working 12 hours and delegating, or maybe working 16 hours and not delegating, and I would often choose the latter, which is not healthy.
Yeah, well, I think there's a difference between delegating authority and making sure that the buck stops with somebody at the top. And I think there's an important aspect that, there's no doubt that authority on certain areas needs to be delegated. There's no way one person can handle anything. But I think you do need to remember, and the team needs to remember, that there is one person that's calling the shots. I've never been a big fan of leading by committee. Ask my partners, they'll tell you that. But I really do believe that you need one person in charge, but then you need to delegate down into certain areas.
Number 6 is really interesting. Legitimize reversal. That can be tricky. I mean, what happens when things change or you change your mind?
Well, a lot of this plays into ego and goes back a little bit to the first question when we talk about uncertainty, right? Many people don't want to admit uncertainty. No, everything's fine. It's all under control. Most people don't want to admit they made a mistake. In a time of crisis, one of the best things you can do is admit that this was the wrong choice and move on. I mean, every day we get new facts. If you go back to March 16th, or pretty much when we all kind of went into this whole new world, every day something new came out. So if you put out protocol on the 16th, chances are by the time you hit the 23rd of March, it had changed. Now you got a choice. You can either dig your heels in and say, no, I was right, and stick to it and likely mess things up, or you can call an audible. And I think that's where, when you go back to this whole discussion of delegating authority, is you still have to have somebody who's going to admit they made a mistake, and move on from there.
In the piece, the leadership lessons from COVID hospitals, field hospitals, ends with the one piece of advice that they feel is has been most scientifically validated, and that is simply being there. As long as your leader is on site and present, that's the most confidence-inspiring thing you can do.
Yeah, at the end of the day, whether you're actually contributing or not is a relative term. I mean, the fact that you are there in the trenches with everybody, and then you can take this back to war, as you can take it back to a pandemic, as you can take it back to day-to-day work. I've always been a firm believer of rolling up your sleeves and leading by example. And, for good or bad, and I'm sure there's a few days where, people wish I wasn't here on a regular basis, but, I've been in the office since the end of May, with very few days that I haven't. Why? Because I think it's an important aspect that the team sees, that, those people that are leading have their best interests at heart, and we're not kind of throwing them to the wolves at the end of the day.
Also from HBR, this piece, self-compassion will make you a better leader. Certainly self-compassion, and I always say meditation and taking some time for yourself to just have a quiet moment during the day will make your brain work better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of read this one and chuckled. I can relate to three. The self-kindness one, I'm not so, and it's not that I don't believe it. It's just I'm not so good at the self-kindness component. The three elements of self-kindness are mindfulness, common humanity or humility, and self-kindness. And I think in a world where, we need to admit that we feel off, that we have a bad day, that we are human, that we are facing the same hardships that everybody else is facing, and that we are not standing out there on an island all alone, go a long way in allowing us to do what we were just talking about, which is, make a mistake and correct it. Lead by example. You need these things out there in order to be able to lead properly. And we live in a world that's very different than 50 years ago, where the leader was constant stoic and a very, very general mentality. We live in a world now, especially in a professional environment, where people are really looking to connect, and it's very hard to connect if all you want to say is, "Nah, it's all good, it's all going to be fine, don't worry about it, you're all good." You have to be very mindful of what's going on.
And Mike, very excited for a while, for months, for this one. Really fascinating conversation on the way with Greg Kirstein, Senior VP and General Counsel of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Mr. Kirstein, welcome to today's Entrepreneur in Montreal.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
So maybe just a couple of seconds on the intro to Greg, just to kind of contextualize. Greg has been with the Columbus Blue Jackets pretty much since day one, going back to 1998 when the franchise was granted. Prior to that, he did have a life as a partner in a law firm for a number of years, and as well, you have a little bit of a sports reporting history there as well. So, and I think you went through Duquesne University and journalism from Ohio State, like a few years back, Greg.
Something like that. I don't want to antiquate myself.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we all seem to be hitting that lately. So, and I think COVID's added a few years to all of us. So, yeah. I guess the first question is, what got you into law, going back to those days, as well as journalism, and how did that get you get you a job at the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, I'll try to give you the short version, Michael. So I'm a reformed sports writer. I had been fortunate enough I interned in Detroit with the morning paper there, then to the afternoon paper in Pittsburgh, which is now defunct, and then for a year and a half with the Miami Herald. And I started to know my way around professional and collegiate sports. And then I had this ex-girlfriend and 10th grade social studies teacher, both pushing me that I'd be a wonderful lawyer. And I was uncertain. I started late. I was 25 before I even started law school, 28 when I got done. And then all of a sudden I found myself being an insurance defense lawyer with zero sports practice. And that little malady took 9 years to heal. I took a time out along the way. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia as the assistant athletic director for a year. And I just had this conundrum in my head: sports or law, sports or law. And Short version, 1991, minor league hockey came back to Columbus, Ohio for its fourth time. The first three franchises had failed. Our town was growing and relatively entertainment starved, except for Ohio State football and basketball. And all of a sudden, an East Coast Hockey League franchise in Columbus, Ohio was selling out at 6,000 people a night and making a couple $100,000 a year profit. And I became their lawyer. It was 90% of my fund, 10% of my income. Um, and then we took the proceeds from the East Coast team, built the first ice rink ever in Columbus in 15 years to grow the game. And then we started building the second ice rink. Along the way, my law partner gave me our minor league baseball team as an account because he had done it for years and he thought I was becoming this sports guy. And then we got a call from the people that currently own the Blue Jackets, who are, my bosses and have been wonderful to me. And they wanted to invest in our ice rink company. And to be frank, we thought the call was a hoax. These were some of the most powerful people in the city. And we had one ice rink built and another one under construction. And we couldn't believe that they wanted to invest. But that's because we didn't know that they were kicking around applying for an NHL team. So that's sort of the 1982 to 1997 story.
We noticed in your bio that the franchise has existed for 20 years, but there was 3 years of building leading up to day one, to the puck drop. Tell me about those 3 years and how intimidating it must be to just start an NHL franchise from scratch.
Is excruciating still a word? We opened the office with 4 people. Doug McLean, our president and general manager, Kathy Little, who was a VP of marketing from the parent company and is still with the parent company as a VP, me, and one administrative assistant. So 4 people walked in the first day. Over 3 years, that turned into a staff of 150 people. We were in a satellite office. There was no arena. The arena was 2.5 years away. There was a big empty site where a prison used to exist, and it was full of gravel. And we were trying to put this thing together from scratch. And people think, well, what do you do first? We started working, Dan, on a lease for a building that didn't exist. And then we were approaching the regional television networks from a credibility standpoint, trying to make sure we would be on the same sports channel as the Cincinnati Reds, the Cleveland Indians, the Cleveland Cavaliers, those sorts of things. So that's how we kicked it off. It was a little crazy with 4 people.
It's funny because you listen to the years of franchises, and as hockey, as baseball, as everybody else, franchises have moved from city to city based on not being able to attract a crowd or not being able to fill an arena. Funny enough, last night I was watching the old Major League with Charlie Sheen and Tom Berenger, and the whole moving the franchise away from Cleveland, trying to move it down to Florida, and we've watched these things over the years, and we have a tendency to forget that this is a business at the end of the day. We see this as entertainment. We see it as, bigger than life, but there is a business that keeps this going at the end of the day. And it's not all glamour and glory.
Yeah, these, Mike, these are 1998 numbers, but the McConnell family, who owns the franchise, committed to an $80 million investment. I don't know what that would be in today's dollars. And you had to pay it in 2 installments. Nationwide Insurance committed to build, at the time, a $150 million arena with private money. And so you don't make those kind of decisions without some trepidation and some due diligence. And then at the time, the payrolls in the league were anywhere from 20 million to 35 million. So you knew you were going to bite off on a NHL payroll, and you had to go find a city to host your AHL team. We started in Syracuse for the first number of years, but every one of those has a dollar sign to it. And we tease at the office, if you've seen the movie Happy Gilmore, where he carries the big cardboard checks in his back seat, we took one of those $40 million cardboard checks to New York to Commissioner Bettman's office just for kicks, but it's real money, and this is a real business.
And when you start raising the money and committing, how many season tickets have you sold?
Yeah, at the beginning, there wasn't much choice. One of the mandates that the commissioner's office put on the expansion franchises, which were Nashville in 98, Atlanta in 99, Columbus and Minneapolis in 2000, we had to sell 12,500 season tickets to meet a bogey that had been set by the league. And that was to show that we were real. So 12,500 in an 18,000 seat building, it had to be 2/3 pre committed. And the league reserved the right to take the franchise back if you couldn't do it. So it was serious business.
And before any of that's done, your investors have already committed dollars to this project. So it's not like they've committed knowing they've got 12,500.
Yeah, there's some periodic payments that go on in the beginning that lead to that 80 million, and probably led to the 500 million for Las Vegas a couple years ago. But those periodic payments are nothing small, trust me.
As lifelong hockey fans, Mike, it's just it's really, really fascinating to find out how these organizations are run. And I'm curious, as someone who works in marketing and PR, Greg, here in Montreal, we have a very unique environment when it comes to media and our NHL franchise. Our media is very, shall we say, diligent when it comes to following the team. I mean, we have an entire industry, really, that is in the orbit of the Montreal Canadiens. What kind of pressure are you under in Ohio, and have you developed at least something of a hype and media culture there?
Yeah, so if we go back 22 years, 1998 through currently, I would say there's more pressure now than there was at the beginning. The equivalent I can give you, the pressure you have in Montreal with the hockey team is what the Ohio State University football team faces in Columbus. It's 24/7. It's 365 days a year. When Rick Nash played for us, one of our early great players, Rick liked the fact that he could hide in Columbus. No one knew NHL players. It was an acquired taste. That's changed, and it's changed a little bit, Dan, because we've won a lot in the last 5 years also. We've become a perennial playoff team, which didn't happen in the beginning. But we're from September until May, we're in the news every night: television, radio, internet, social media, and I feel we have a foothold now. In the early years, it was tough. It was pricing that fans had never seen before. They were used to college sports. It was a sport. Many Ohioans grew up on football, basketball, baseball. So if you don't know the rules and you don't know the players, it's a tough commitment to spend your money. And we've overcome all those things. So has the Nashville franchise, which was 2 years older than us. We were in brand new territory. But so I would say, yeah, media pressure is a little tougher now than it was 20 years ago. Now they expect us to win all the time.
So what has been the LeBron factor in terms of sports within Ohio, in terms of coverage? Has it been good for hockey? Has it been good for the Blue Jackets, or has it been a takeaway?
We're fortunate, Michael. We've got Ohio State, Bowling Green, and Miami University of Ohio that have always had NCAA Division I teams, and those are long standing, and they play major collegiate hockey. Cleveland has always had an AHL team. Toledo's always had an East Coast League team. So does Cincinnati. So it's not as if it was this foreign thing. The NHL was brand new and the pricing was brand new. The LeBron factor for us was finally getting over the hump starting in 2014. We made the playoffs once in our first 12 or 13 years. We've now made it 4 of the last 6 or 5 of the last 7. And it changes things. It just makes your job easier, whether you're selling tickets, sponsorship, TV time, or even when the evil team lawyer walks into the room, people like you more. So for us, winning has been a magic elixir, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if you're going to ice or field a winning team, it makes a huge difference. With maybe over the years, the exception of Toronto, going back to the Harold Ballard days of the 70s, the Leafs, they could fill the rink no matter who was playing. Other than that, definitely, I think a winning team is, and it's certainly, you've done you've done a fascinating job, and I guess this is an NHL kudos as much as it is a Blue Jackets, but Nashville, yourselves, and Vegas, I just phenomenal franchises relatively quickly in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, we tease that we're a teenager. We've been there 20 years. We had one complete lockout in 0405. We had a partial lockout in 1213. And so we see the logos at center ice, New York, Detroit, Pittsburgh. They have a 50 or a 75 or a 90 for how many years they've existed. We're 18 years old in terms of ice time. That makes us a teenager. And so we're pretty proud of what we've accomplished. And if you saw, our Tampa series 2 years ago when we swept the best team in the league and you saw our building, you would agree that hockey has a pretty good foothold in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's evident when you see this on screen that your fans are as devoted and as dogged as anybody else at the end of the day. And I have to say, it's great to, we've always considered hockey to be, Canadian at the end of the day. And, when every time we moved into different franchise areas, it was a skepticism. But, I think the NHL and the individual teams have done a great job. It can't be easy from an HR perspective. As much as you guys are successful and as much as the franchises and the league have been successful, to manage, behind the scenes team who doesn't get the notoriety, say, that the players get, and they know they're actually, as vital in some cases to the running of the organization. And like any other pro sports team, they're managing the elite athlete can be challenging. And then you got to do all of that within a cap. So.
Yeah. Well, we have two concepts that we look for in people on the HR side. We look for performance and fit. And performance is, can you do the job? And we hope that you come to work every day with an attitude that whatever department you're in, you want to win the Stanley Cup for that department. We look for high achievers. We look for people that produce. And on the fit side, we look for good people. Again, another cliche, but if we can surround ourselves with the 150 that work for the Jackets and another 1,000 people that are part-timers that work for the arena, if we can get most of them to perform and to fit, we're going to put on a product that's really, really special. And so those are sort of our standards. And we challenge ourselves. We try to be accountable to each other. We try to be in a friendly, comprehensive, but collaborative fashion. And I think if you talk to our people, a great overwhelming majority of them are pretty happy that they work there. We also have very fair ownership. I use that word a lot. Sure, there are tough days at every office in North America. It doesn't matter what business you're in. So I've been there, Dan, 22 years, and I've never seen an employee treated unfairly. It's one of the best things that we have going at the Columbus Blue Jackets.
It's funny. It's an interesting concept. We all talk about chemistry and culture on the ice or in the locker room. But the culture behind the scenes is equally important to the success of the franchise and the team. No different than your ordinary business where you got a couple of people that are out there, kind of in the limelight every day, and then you got the bulk of those people down in the trenches. And it's nice to hear that there's an equal amount of support and I guess accolades going to the team that nobody sees.
Yeah, and so Michael, one of the standards I use, and the HR department reports to me, and we've got a wonderful director, but I ask our people all the time to have an attitude of how can I help as opposed to what do you want? And I think there's a stark difference between those two concepts.
Excellent. So I'll challenge you with the last topic, which is I guess is always difficult, is star players being traded and moving people around. The contract world of hockey is certainly not what it was 30 years ago. This is big business now, and your players and I guess that is a business unto itself from that perspective, right?
Yeah. We've got highly paid, highly talented people who do nothing but manage the salary cap. And they've got a dossier on the 700 men in the league and the 700 men in the AHL. And we know when everyone's contract expires. We know who their agent is. We know which cities their spouse might prefer. And you're projecting forward 5, 6, 7 years. to fit all these little parts together and produce that product that's going to win on the ice and be an asset to the community. And so that's a thankless job, because if just one widget is out of place, your team might not perform at the level for which you're paying.
Let's bring into the conversation Julie Cote. Julie is a tax specialist in real estate for non-residents at FL Montreal, obviously something very close to the concerns of NHL teams and those who have people moving around the continent. Julie, welcome to CJD.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And Mike, certainly something that applies to NHL teams. I mean, it must be difficult to manage people and also to manage their finances and their assets. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this, and obviously some of the issues here are, sometimes you have a forced move. So if you get traded, there's a forced move across the border. For other people, it's, setting up business, or it might be, a COVID environment. We've seen a lot of people come to Canada over the U.S. politics over the last 4 years, looking to have a place to go. So one of the things that most people don't recognize is, what are the tax implications of acquiring a residence cross-border as an American coming into Canada, or for anybody else for that matter. Julie, when we're looking at some of these things, like what attracts a foreigner to invest in real estate market in Canada, or more specifically in the Montreal area?
Well, Mike, we are having a very different situation this year with COVID. We see a lot of people buying properties in order to come and self-quarantine and ride it out. So this has been new. But in the past, pre-COVID, well, there's a lot of factors. People love Montreal. The market in Montreal is very stable. The dollar is very good. The exchange rate, when you can get 25% or 30% of your money for free, when you do the exchange, it's a good investment. The properties, they do retain their value. It's not crazy or anything, and basically it's safe. Of course, when you are a hockey player, you want to live in the city where you work. So we do see a lot of these, and they want to buy properties around the arenas.
This all sounds really simple and easy. The reality is once you cross the border into a foreign jurisdiction, we live in a world of compliance, paperwork, filings. What are some of the things that a non-resident buying real estate here in Canada should look at? And what happens if they also decide, hey, I'm only here for part of the year, I want to rent it for the rest of the year?
Well, a lot of foreigners forget the tax aspect of it all. Most of them believe they don't have to report anything to the Canadian government, whether it's their rentals or the capital gain when they sell these wonderful properties. So basically, it's important to get some advice. And also they think that because they own this property, it might make them a resident or of Canada, or that it automatically qualifies for their principal residence. Assuming things is the worst road to go down here. There's so many rules and factors to consider about Canadian residency. Don't guess.
Great, Kirstein. I was wondering, and of course, we're not asking for details, but often real estate and assets can complicate perhaps some deals. Is that ever a factor when players are deciding where to sign and whether or not to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. The first concern that the players have if they're coming from one of the 7 Canadian franchises to Columbus is their immigration status. How quickly can we get them in? And then can we get their spouse or girlfriend in? And then can we get their kids in? And believe it or not, we spend substantial time solving those for people that we're about to acquire.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Julie, what are some of the misconceptions that the owners have of real estate?
That it's easy and straightforward. You need a team to help you. Like in anything else, I'd say do your homework. Don't assume anything. The first step would be to just consult a tax specialist to plan the structure of your purchase while considering the long-term goals for this property. Maybe right now you want to live in it, but once you trade to another team, maybe you want to retain it and rent it or buy it or put it on your spouse's name. And the structure at the beginning is very important because once it's done, it's done. and it can be very costly and a hassle to undo it.
Very much, in play here is Greg and Dan were just saying, when you're talking about being traded across the border, you end up in multi-jurisdictions for taxation purposes, and that probably in and of itself could be the topic of an entire show and the complications that come with that. But there's no doubt that people, certainly the pro athletes or doctors or a lot of professionals find themselves working in another jurisdiction, and I think ignorance poses a lot of problems to a lot of people. You hear a lot of athletes, you hear a lot of entertainers who find themselves in hot water subsequent to doing things, having moved into a different jurisdiction. And there's no doubt that real estate plays a very large part of it, and I think, Julie, as you said, that ability to get proper advice sets things off way before you start. It's much easier and cheaper to do it up front than it is to do it after the fact.
Better be safe than sorry.
Julie, thanks so much. And we've come to the end of our show. Greg Kirstein of the Columbus Blue Jackets, we really appreciate your time so much. And we conclude all of these shows by asking our guests for just a piece of wisdom, their one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur. So we'll hand it over to you, sir.
Well, I would say this. If you're in the sports world, be genuine with your fans. If you're in the business world, be genuine with your customers, because on both fronts, they know it if you're not. And we have prided ourselves on being transparent, authentic, genuine with Columbus Blue Jacket fans. And I think 22 years in, it's paying dividends. It's sort of a hallmark of our organization. So that would be my takeaway.
Excellent. Well, Greg, it's been a pleasure having you. I must admit, I feel like a kid in a candy store at the moment. So I will stop talking before I start to drool. But it is always a pleasure to not only have somebody that that lives in the world that we all kind of dream about, but somebody that has taken the time and the effort and the gentleman that you are. So, Greg, on behalf of the show, thank you for your time and for your energy.
I've been very fortunate, and we're glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. And we're taking a pause for the holidays. Mike will be back on January 18th, and we'll see you then. Don't forget, over 10 years worth of entrepreneurial insight at today'sentrepreneur.org. All the very best for the holiday season from all of us at FL and TNKR Media. See you soon.
Happy holidays to all.
Of TNKR Media. Good talk.